how do you go about fixing the culture for the next generation?
At Ocean Bottle, we never saw the competitor being other reusable bottle brands. The competitor is the plastic bottle on the shelf. It's the cultural common enemy that we all have of single use is out. Make it convenient for your people to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. It all comes back to, is it convenient? Is it there on hand? It's not that hard. It's rather than thinking of life in the ocean as sort of your turtle with a beer holder around its neck, which is horrendous and we absolutely need to stop that. It's the microplastics level that is becoming a real increasing problem. We're trying to solve, a climate crisis, and we're killing one of our greatest assets in that, which is the ocean and being able to be a carbon sink. So we need to stop plastic getting into the ocean in the first place, which is why we focus on building those collection centres in the areas where most of the plastic is getting to the ocean.
How do we get the messaging out there that this is actually really, really important?
Hi, I'm Chris Caldwell, and welcome to Season 3 of Conversations on Climate.
Becky, thank you so much for taking the time to come into London Business School to have this voluntary, brilliant conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Ocean Bottle, fantastic company. I think everyone associated with LBS will know it quite well.
Yes.
It's an LBS founded startup, which is a great story. But tell us a little bit about your story, like your backstory. What made you think that plastics and oceans was what you want to be dedicating your career to?
Yeah. So I think that most humans have some kind of intrinsic desire to be by the sea at some point. We're at their holiday and you sort of always have those passions. But I'm actually not one of the people that came from I grew up sailing or was raised by the ocean at all. My family are farmers. So I'm the first in my family to really go down any kind of a corporate route. But the fundamentals of farming are very low waste, very circular. Nothing gets wasted in farming. Everything is reused 100 times until it physically can't be repurposed for something else. And that's the principle in which I really was raised. But then if I look at the direction of travel of where we are as certainly a Western economy, it's very wasteful. Single use dominates almost every part of our lives. And when the opportunity came up to work on something that really addresses that at the heart of it and has such an important cause behind that, it was a no-brainer for me.
Okay. And how did the opportunity come about?
I saw an opportunity for the Chief of Staff role for Ocean Bottle. And at the time I was at PwC, I was working for their executive board's strategy team. And I thought I could probably do that. That looks quite interesting. I'd worked a lot with the purpose team. I became the corporate purpose lead at PwC. So tackling a lot of the similar kind of large purposeful issues that the businesses tend to get behind. But what was always frustrating in a corporate environment is a lot of talk and not so much action. So when this came up, it was the action role. The chief of staff role, it's not always very well understood, but you ultimately have to be the ultimate doer, I would say. And I loved that, all action. And it was the perfect setup to then transition into the managing director role, where you kind of have to do both the leadership and the doing often, especially in the startup world.
Fantastic. So you decided to focus in, so Ocean Bottle, I'm sure there are plenty of other opportunities out there at the time. But what particularly attracted you to Ocean Bottle? And in kind of particular, tell us about the scale of the problem within oceans. What is the problem with pollution? Why should we care about plastics?
Okay, so what attracted me about Ocean Bottle was the clarity of message is so easy. You say to someone, we are going to stop ocean-bound plastic. We're on a mission to stop 7 billion bottles getting into the ocean. It's clear, we get it, and it's quite a visual amount that you can see. And as an outsider looking in, that attracted me straight away. You start to unpack the problem of, okay, well, how big is this? And it's really scary. So from a plastic perspective at the moment, if we look at present day, we're finding plastic in the Mariana Trench, the deepest parts of the ocean. It's been found the top of the Himalayas. It's in clouds, which means it rains down into our food systems, into our water supply. Plastic is literally everywhere. When we look at the plastic found in the ocean, around ocean, the total ocean waste, roughly 50% of it is from single-use plastics, plastic bags, bottles, cutlery containers, wrappers. Basically four items, 50% of ocean waste, which is completely insane, and that's just where we're at today. Unfortunately, if we look out of where this problem gets to, by 2040, it's expected that plastic will quadruple. So the weight of plastic in the ocean is going to have quadrupled by 2040 unless we fundamentally create system change. So you've got a really clear message, and then you're getting on board to create the system change that stops that happening. It's quite a powerful driver, and quite, from a personal perspective, you're very much working to something that matters.
Okay. So with that level of expansion, that must mean that plastics are going to become more heavily utilised in places that it isn't heavily utilised now. I can't imagine us using more plastic in the Western world than we currently do.
Yeah.
So is this a kind of the part of the business model that you're seeing for plastic petrochemicals companies to be kind of producing more plastic and having it in other parts of the world?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at most big, especially the large corporates, they have a messaging around reduction of plastic, because that message sells. And in many cases, they are doing important work to switch to, they'll often talk about partly recycled bottles or fully recyclable bottles or whatever it may be. The problem is they're still single use and the amount is growing. So even if 30% of those bottles are now recycled plastic rather than virgin plastic, you've got 50 times more plastic bottles in total that you're going to sell. So you've made a small reduction, but you've made a huge total growth. That's really where we're seeing it. So yes, it is kind of plastic being used in more areas because it is a fantastic material. And there are many use cases for plastic where, we all often had a COVID vaccine from medical grade plastic. There are very few alternatives on the market. There are places where plastic makes sense. The problem is you see it continually chosen for areas where it doesn't need to be. So it's going to last a lifetime, but used for 5 minutes. Plastic is sort of a bit of an overkill choice of product, but it's also just the amount that we demand. Population is growing, and as is the demand with that.
Interesting. Well, tell us what happens if we don't tackle this problem.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. Again, starting with all the bad news. Like I said, it's going to quadruple by 2040. Quite a visual representation is that if we keep going the way we are, plastic in the ocean will outweigh fish by 2050.
Okay.
We're going to live in a world where there is more plastic in our seas than fish. You're going to see fishermen going fishing and getting a whole bag of bottles coming back, which is a visual that we actually used in our recent ad that's currently playing on Sky. That's the direction of travel, really. Unless we can tackle it at the root cause of the problem, which is plastic shouldn't be getting into the ocean in the first place. Why do we see an increasing flow of plastic despite all of this talk about recyclability and waste management? Actually, what we're seeing on the ground is an increase in that direction, which is exactly the problem that we try to address.
Okay, and what's the impact on kind of human health and fish health, marine life health of too much plastics?
There's a few different areas. So we're already seeing child birth defects associated with plastic, and just literally there is plastic in breast milk, there is plastic in blood. This is being relatively consistently found now. On the surface, already you can see, well, that's a problem. You're not supposed to have plastic in those things. But actually the degree to how many problems can come off the back of that, the science will yet to tell, because this is sort of new ground for us. We can be fairly certain that that is not going to be a good direction for anyone. In terms of fish and marine life, you see 100,000 marine life animals killed each year from plastics in the ocean. There's another interesting point that is often not really discussed, and it's rather than thinking of life in the ocean as sort of your turtle with a beer holder around its neck, which is horrendous, and we absolutely need to stop that. It's the microplastics level that is becoming a real increasing problem. So when we look at, we talk about the ocean as the largest carbon sink in the world, which it is. Mm-hmm. But how does it actually do that? That's something that we sort of don't necessarily go, well, how does it sink that carbon? One of the major ways is plankton in the ocean, found in the ocean, that sequesters the carbon and gives back oxygen. So actually at the moment, every other breath we take is thanks to the ocean producing that oxygen. However, that plankton is ingesting microplastics, and it's killing the plankton. It's either ingesting it so it cannot sequester as much carbon because it doesn't have the nutrient value. It's still surviving, but it's not able to do such an efficient job, or it is literally dying because it's ingested too much microplastics. So if we think about human health, we think about marine life, and we also think about, the two of those, it all connects together of we're trying to solve, a climate crisis, and we're killing one of our greatest assets in that, which is the ocean and being able to be a carbon sink.
Okay, so that was the problem. Then along came Ocean Bottle. Could you tell us a little bit about the origin story of Ocean Bottle before you arrived?
Yeah, so Ocean Bottle was founded by Will and Nick, both alumni of LBS, and they had this, they had a point to prove, I guess, around, look, you can have a profitable company that is purposeful and they don't need to be disconnected. And the notion of, well, everyone drinks water, right? But many people would say, you're crazy, you're starting a water bottle company. There are so many other great reusable water bottle companies out there. And that is true. But ultimately at Ocean Bottle, we never saw the competitor being other reusable bottle brands. The competitor is the plastic bottle on the shelf, because we are not trying to change you to a different reusable water bottle. We want to change you from having behavior of reaching for a plastic bottle and not being someone that reuses to someone that does. The research that we did said 80% of people have a reusable, but only 16% of people are using that on a kind of daily, weekly basis, on a regular basis. So that's where the major problem is. How do we reshape the refill revolution? And how do we fund something that means, okay, we start to fix the underlying problem here? So that's where Ocean Bottles, the genesis was born.
And how does Ocean Bottle tackle that particular issue? So how does Ocean Bottle make you more likely to be moving from that 16% you said of people who have them but don't use them, or someone like you or I who have walked around with the bags with our Ocean Bottles in the backpacks?
Yeah. There's two avenues. So the first is very much around strength of story. People are quite proud to say my Ocean Bottle and explain the story, to say this is one bottle but it's collected 1,000 plastic bottles worth of plastic weight. That kind of whole impact side is super important. We also try to nudge people from a behavioural perspective, which is if it has an NFC chip in the bottom and you can scan that in certain locations, but you can also just register it on the app to say, I've refilled and we'll collect additional plastic on your behalf. We have people that have incredible streaks, many hundreds of day streaks of refilling every day with their bottle. It's almost kind of a Duolingo esque comparison where people go, gotta get my streak, gotta refill, and that, embedding that into the behavior of feeling proud of the impact that they're having and feeling empowered that they're actually able to do something. It can often feel quite disempowering when you look at the size of the problem. All those things I've talked about, plastic's going to quadruple, what difference can I make? Makes it very real, makes the impact story there. The second point is making it a product that you kind of can't live without. It's something that you can't just say, oh, it's got a nice story. It still has to stand up in its category and be category beating in many cases.
But the real secret of it is what you said, it's the 1,000. The 1,000 bottles that comes from the one bottle.
Exactly.
How's the business model of that work? How do you, because it's at a competitive price point. How do you make that happen?
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where from the inception of the business, it was part of the business. If you try to put this business model in sort of post, if you try to lift this and put this into, a Unilever, for example, they'd go, this is crazy. But the whole point is proving that it works from the inception so that in 10 years' time, it's crazy to do anything else. So how it works is quite literally, it sits in our cogs. The bottle is made of steel, it's made of plastic, it's got some silicone, it's got the NFC chip, and it's got impact. Impact is a line in our cogs like any other part of the bottle. That is how it scales with us. So as we grow, every additional bottle sold funds more impact because it's just a part of the bottle.
Cool. And how do you then, so on the refills, how do you continue? Because you're going to have, because there's a cost for like every time that you refill it, and I put in my refill, and then you need to go and pull some more, that's the contract, you pull some more bottles out. There's a cost to that, so I'm not giving you any more money. How does that part of the business work?
Yeah. So that's I would say it's the broader brand building concept of creating a refill behavior. You're going to have to put some investment in, and you're going to have to do it in a way that brings the consumer along. The way that we did this kind of beta app test, and it is very much a beta app, I would say, and yet it really took off. We've got 30,000 active users from an app that we haven't really done any advertising around. We haven't done much to make people use it other than produce it. Most people say build it and they will come is lost logic, but it seems to be working here. So now that we sort of have this concept, okay, this works as a concept, people do buy into this if we can reward them in this way, and that is a reward signal. Now we can look to, okay, well, where does the commercial payback come from? So it's very much seen as this is the investment, and then in the longer term, well, how does this then allow us to create additional impact? But you have to think about it in that way around of our competitor is convenience. Our competitor is that plastic bottle in the shelf. So I've got to find lots of ways to make this solution more convenient, more attractive. This is one of the angles that we do that with.
I know that there's places around where I can be refilling it. It might be in a coffee shop, whatever else. Is there any kind of formal relationships with those businesses, or did they just say, "Well, just add me to the app because I will give free water"? Is there any kind of more formal than that?
So we've previously done some trials to kind of test this out, and it's certainly something that we're looking to expand. What we do have is on the Ocean Co side, which we can come to, but the premise is the same. It's a very exciting partnership with Aqua Libra. So Aqua Libra. They do refill stations. They're part of Britvic Group, and they have an NFC scanner. So you can scan your bottle there and then, and they are in offices, in co-op. You can go to co-op and scan your bottle, get some water, but it's often it's flavored water. It's not got nasties in it. No sweeteners. It's all natural, and it also funds ocean-bound plastic collection. So through that is it's a very fast-growing company. It's a very fast-growing proposition. It's great to see more businesses getting on board with, well, why don't we offer a different solution rather than just having a whole stack of plastic bottles on the shelf? So through Aqua Libra, we're definitely seeing really good growth in that area.
Okay, great. And so you raise Ocean Co there, which is, so tell us, we kind of get a fair idea of what Ocean Bottle does and the technology there. How did Ocean Co kind of branch out from that? Yeah,
so it was born within Ocean Bottle. So if you think about, we're selling this bottle and we're collecting 1,000 plastic bottles and plastic weight, that's the message that we're giving to consumers. But how do they trust that? And in a world of transparency being key, you have to have something that can say ironclad, we said we were going to do that, and we did that. That's exactly what we did. And so we built what we call our impact engine. And that is ultimately being able to be fully traceable to say, when you bought this bottle, it demanded 1,000 plastic bottles in weight, which is 11.4 kilograms. So we have on this side, we have 11.4 kilograms of demand. We need to match that with supply. And we have partners across Asia, Africa and South America to go, okay, well, we've got supply in various areas. This is, it's almost an exchange. We go, great, 11.4 kilograms, it's matched, and it's matched here. It was matched in India, it was matched in this collection center, and that matching is made on the blockchain. That impact engine is for Ocean Bottle. But we thought, hang on a minute, that demand can come from anything. We are selling a bottle, and that's the trigger that triggers 11.4 kilograms. But you could sell anything. You could be a product, it could be a service, it could be an interaction, it could be for every podcast, for every word I said on this podcast, you can attach it to whatever you want to. It's about, we've built the system that matches the demand and the supply. So out comes Ocean Co, where we said, if we're on this mission to collect 7 billion bottles by 2025, we need more people to get on board and more people to start funding ocean-bound plastic. How can we help other businesses bring the magic of Ocean Bottle to what they do? We're not gatekeeping this technology. We want other people to be doing the same thing.
Okay, and how does as an example, if you buy like a concert ticket, you might have like a couple of pounds attached to an extra cost, and then that's used for plastic. What types of initiatives are you working on?
Yeah, exactly that. So like I said, it can be attached to anything. I got my coffee on the way here from Grind. Grind is one of our partners. So if you go to if you're in London and you go and buy a coffee in a coffee shop, either you buy their pods, their compostable pods online, their coffee beans, that's all funding ocean-bound plastic. So it's exactly that, bringing the magic of Ocean Bottle to what they do is, it can be attached to anything. It doesn't have to be plastic. They have nothing. They have no plastic in their supply chain anyway, or in their products anyway.
Cool. Okay, so kind of reaching to the other side, to the side of the business where people are taking the plastics from the ocean.
Yeah.
So you have partners who just literally dredge from the ocean and then take the plastic, weigh it. What happens next?
So our operations work within 50 kilometers of the coastline.
Okay.
So the way that we see it is, if your sink was overflowing, would you start mopping the floor or would you turn off the tap? Mm-hmm. You turn off the tap, right? And then you start mopping. To take it out of the ocean is not addressing the fact that the tap's still on. And so we need to stop plastic getting into the ocean in the first place, which is why we focus on building those collection centres in the areas where plastic is most of the plastic is getting to the ocean. Mm-hmm. So within 50 kilometres of the coastline, around rivers, waterways, this is often in the global south where there isn't waste management. So there's about 2 billion people on Earth that have no form of waste management. That means if they drop a plastic bottle or any form of waste, if it's within 50 kilometres, it's going to end up in the ocean. It's going to end up in the waterways and the rivers that then flow to the ocean. There's not really any other way for it to go, especially as there's often high rainfall areas and plastic floats. So we set up these collection sites with our partners in the local areas to go, well, this is where plastic is getting to the ocean from. So we incentivise people in those areas to become part of the workforce, to go and collect that plastic. They take it to their local collection site and they have it weighed, and they can then get that plastic exchanged for payment. The important thing is that we collect all types of plastic. It doesn't have to be recyclable plastic, which does already have a value in the kind of usual economic marketplace. It's important that you collect that non-recyclable plastic, what's kind of no or low value, because otherwise it's just going to end up in the ocean. So that's where we come in to create that demand for collecting it and providing an economic reward for the people that do.
Okay, and then what? It's collected.
Yeah.
So what do you do with it then? Particularly the low value stuff that you can't recycle anyway.
Yeah. So then that is split off into two camps. One is where it can be recycled and it can go back into plastic products. The other is, like you say, what do you do with all the stuff that can't be recycled that's technically at end of life? We are ensuring that doesn't then end up back into landfill or back into the ocean. We break that down and it's co-processed into cement, which actually reduces the carbon footprint of cement, another industry that really needs some investment around decarbonisation. But it means that it's got a second purpose. It's reused in a different and responsible way. Okay,
and in all cases, it's cement that's the end product?
It's pretty much, yeah. So it's either recycled or it's co-processed into cement, sort of eco bricks as they're often called.
Sure. And is that process, like, what do you heat it? Do you burn it? Like, how do you get the plastic into something that then
into the cement?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're making cement, it's broken down into almost granular form, and then it goes into the furnace in the same way that you don't actually have to change the process that dramatically. That's why it works. Is it can just be broken down and added into along with all the other ingredients.
Okay, because I was in my mind I picture plastic melting, and it doesn't seem like if you stick it into a furnace as part of cement making process, which is like enormously hot.
Yeah.
It seems like it would just like evaporates.
I think it's because it's joined with the other the sand and the other elements within the process.
Okay.
But I'm not a scientist, I have to say.
Fair enough. And you can only recycle plastics a certain number of times, isn't that right? It's like you do them like 2 or 3 times, and
certain plastics, are once they're made into something. So, for example, when we talk about recyclable plastics that are recycled, one of the biggest buyers of recyclable plastics at the moment are clothing companies that want to use recycled materials in their clothing. The problem then is that in the way that that is processed, most of the time they're not able to be recycled again. So once they've been recycled into that clothing, that's kind of it. And so this is one of the things that from Ocean Bottles material innovation is very important, that the plastic we use can be recycled.
Okay. It's interesting because again, it's probably just a misconception from my end, but I had the impression that a large amount of the plastics were coming from the global north, and we had them on boats, and we were sticking, and they were just ending up in the ocean, and and it was our plastics ending up on the beaches in Africa. But it seems like you're saying that the focus for Ocean Bottle is domestically used plastics, by guys and girls on the ground, and stopping that going into the ocean rather than stopping my plastic going up on their beach.
So you're not wrong in that the global north certainly has a lot to answer for. So yes, we export the problem often to countries that pay to receive that that waste, and it becomes their problem. The problem is we're exporting it to places that, like I say, are in areas that don't have waste management. So then what happens to it? You're moving your waste to somewhere that has no waste management. That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And it ends up in the same problem. It's potentially, if it's in the area 50 kilometers from the coast, even if it's in landfill, it's going to end up in the ocean. It floats. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely right to say that it's not a global south problem. It is a global problem. The problem behind that is that we don't have the funding in the global south. They can't just say, oh well, we'll create a waste management system. You think if they did, they would have done that. Mm-hmm. We're very naive to that concept of, oh, we'll just ship it there and pay. No, you have to work on the ground to invest, create the infrastructure to do so there. It doesn't mean that we're not accountable to sorting our own waste out here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah, and there's all sorts of horror stories about the big bottle producers here, the big fizzy drinks providers here, and all of their the promises that just don't get fulfilled, and the targets that are seriously left behind. When actually you think about it, when you say we're working on a fully recyclable bottle, that's well, just go back to glass.
Yeah, exactly.
that's you had one of those.
Exactly.
But throw it away.
It's great to see the likes of Modern Milkman, who have just flipped the whole process on its head. They've gone, hold on a minute. We had a system that worked for milk. It was perfectly fine. It was circular. Mm-hmm. You put your milk bottle out that was used. You got one that was full. It was in glass. It was sterilized. It worked perfectly fine. We went to plastic because it's cheaper and because convenience is king. And it's okay. Well, if we're going to compete again, we have to be equally as convenient, but not using the plastics that, we, even from a microplastics perspective, you don't really want your product to be in, that kind of flimsy plastic. It's going to leach microplastics into those items. So yeah, absolutely. It's often about going back to the old school processes that worked, but making them more convenient to the consumer now. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Well, a daily delivery of milk, you can't be any more convenient.
You cannot. It's literally your doorstep. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I've noticed in a few countries around the world, you're going back to the future, where back in 20 years ago when I was kind of visiting places, like you'd see people collecting their bottles and giving them back and getting their 50p's or 50 cents or whatever else in for this trade. But in Ireland, we've just introduced that again, where all of our bottles and our cans, there's a tariff on them, and you can get them back. That has to be a good process.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely. And parts of Europe, I think Germany are quite ahead on this as well. Mm-hmm. It's normal. Mm-hmm. It's becoming normal. And again, those are good policies because they get to behavioural change. Mm-hmm. It's if you know that you're paying a little bit more, and it's really easy. It's got to be equally easy to put it in the bin or put it in the recyclable to get your money back. Well, of course I'm going to put it in the area which gets my money back. So it's again, it comes to that kind of the heart of convenience.
And one of kind of Ocean Bottle's kind of key messages, which is really cool, is like it's no bullshit sustainability.
Yeah.
Could you explain what you mean by no bullshit sustainability?
Yeah, so I guess I already mentioned around large corporates often will have quite nice taglines, and they will have initiatives that are important. But if you look at the kind of total ambition level, they're still giving a lot more back to shareholders than they are putting into, renewable programs, for example, or doubling down investment. I mean, oil and gas is a prime example where they'll say, yeah, we're invested all these billions into these renewable projects. Now that is true, but they're investing many more billions in fossil fuel projects and many more in returning profit to shareholders. So, the level of ambition there is not great. Our level of ambition is such that, it is really, really hard for us to get there. And we'll be very transparent about where we are in that journey. So we're not going to say we're perfect sustainability company. We don't need perfect sustainable companies. We need everyone doing sustainability imperfectly, not a couple of people doing it perfectly. It's about, everyone doing their bit. Mm-hmm. How can we push for that? So if you look at our latest impact report, we're very transparent around these are things that we said that we were set out to do. All of them are each one of those goals would look ambitious in a corporate, right? They're all of them, but there's like pages of them. And then we'll report, okay, this is how we did, this is how we did, this is how we hold ourselves accountable. It's all there. We're not trying to hide the failures. I would much rather reach for a very ambitious goal and not quite reach it, and therefore have done so much more good along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, but it's really hard to do.
It is.
It's like people, what's your kind of your shareholder structure? Because in what you see happening a lot is really well-intentioned CEOs and senior management reaching out, going, we're going to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And they really try to stretch themselves and don't quite get there, and they get hammered. Yeah. So the next time it's kind of, we'll make far less ambitious goals that we know we'll be able to get, and if they had been more ambitious in the first place, you would achieve more. Yeah. But they would not get hammered in the process. So safety first approach.
Yeah. So I'd say there's two sides, because you've got the full stakeholder set. One is the consumer side, one is the investor side. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate in that our investors they're here they are partners. And that was very important, and it's something that Nick has spoken to me a lot about, of why we chose these investors and the terms behind that investment as well, is we're partners in this together, and they want the same outcomes. They're here to see ocean health restored. We want the same things, and so you can have a more reasonable conversation. That doesn't mean that there's not commercial pressure there, but it's on balance, I would say, and there's a healthy level of recognizing going for something that's really ambitious is going to have some bumps along the road. We're here for the ride. The other side is consumers, and that is where you have to be super transparent. It's one of the reasons why we built the Impact Engine, is if your consumers have any doubt around what you're doing, then you'll be punished. And rightly so, to a level. I'm asking you to buy a product that I'm telling you this is what it does, and I expect you to do what you say you're doing. Mm-hmm. You have to be transparent, and you have to educate your consumer on why we're going for this, why it's difficult, all the things that we did to try and get there, and the reasons why we didn't make it, and what we have learned. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, where we found our community to be very understanding, because we've brought them along for the ride, because we're not just telling them once in an impact report once a year. If you're on our newsletters, the impact report won't really be a surprise, because you've been along for the journey. We've been very transparent with you the entire way.
Taking the investor point first. So there seems like there's a particular class of ESG, sustainability type investor out there who are happy to take impact as one of their key KPIs, key matrices, and might sacrifice some return because they're making an impact. Would that be?
I'd say it's certainly fair that because they recognise what we're trying to do, that the timescale isn't as traditional capital markets. It's not, what is it this quarter? They recognise that you got a longer scale. You've got longer scale work to do here. And yes, they are often. Some of them are ocean focused particularly, but I would say that it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have the commercial pressure, because we are for profit. And so if you are for profit, you got to turn one. Where you see, purpose and profit come together is when your metrics, when you hit your KPIs, both are improved. If you have to decouple your impact and your commercials, then your business model is going to constantly be working against each other. So you see this in a lot of companies that have sort of turned that corner to be purposeful but also profitable. Is when, okay, well, how do they ladder up together? So when we think about the ocean bottle, I sell one more bottle, impact goes up by 11.4 kilograms. They go up together, right? Revenues are going up as impact is going up. You can't decouple them. That is the business model. So yes, there's a pressure to be commercial. That remains, even if you have understanding investors, because they are doing it for profit.
There has to be a point where you're making a conscious trade-off, though, where you're saying that, well, we're putting an awful lot into, say, like, for example, the refilling stations.
Yeah.
Like, that has to be a cost center. Like,
yeah.
there's no revenue attached to that. So shareholders would be better off right now financially, at least in the short term, for not having done that.
Yeah, in the short term, exactly. So it's about what's a cost and what's an investment. So you could say, for example, it's a great product on its own, why have impact? Because it would sell. The product on its own would sell. I think it's leading, best in class in its category. But then it is kind of just a bottle and there's no story behind it. So if you think about how much some brands are spending on their brand, on their marketing, they have to think of all these ideas of things to talk about to their audience to be relevant, and that's constantly changing. We don't have to do any of that. We have one clear message on impact that we are funding, we can be transparent about, we can always talk about it. The consistency that you get with that, the consistency of message is what many brands would die for. They're spending millions on agencies to create this message that might last them 10 years. Well, we've got a message that's going to last us forever. And it's not free, that's the investment that we make, but it's invested in impact. And I'd rather spend that money investing in impact than sitting in an ad agency. So yes, there is a trade-off, but not when you start to think about, well, what else would I have to do if I didn't have that impact? Suddenly, it makes sense as the business model. It makes complete sense. And it's why the growth of Ocean Bottle has been so successful, because we've hit that sweet spot.
Yeah, and like I did read your sustainability report, and it is very impressive and very ambitious.
Yeah.
But I wonder how do you control the supply chain? How do you control, like, if you look down to your partners in other parts of the world, how do you make sure that people are doing what they say they're doing?
Yeah.
Like, it could be it's a very easy thing to be tripped over taking on a partner who's actually just dumping the stuff back in the ocean or whatever.
Exactly, yeah, for sure. So the process through which the due diligence process that we go through is long. We have 3 partners. We only have 3 partners because we have tried to have other partners that haven't necessarily got all the way through. Those partners are heavily audited across both kind of social and operationally. So in those areas, it's not as simple as to just say, set up the collection centre, collection will come. No, you have to work on the social aspect of the area to enable that workforce to become part of the solution, to be able to access this. So there's a number of things that they need to do, and that we have to have that audited independently for all of those partners. Again, we do have quite a few in the supply in our pipeline at the moment of looking to become partners on board, but it's a really, really long process, because exactly as you say, we have to have full trust that it's happening and that there's continuous audit going on.
But even in your own kind of sustainability report, you say that it's impossible to be perfect. How do you balance that, desire to be kind of outspoken advocates of kind of no bullshit sustainability, but also recognizing your own imperfections? Firstly,
I think being reasonable. Being reasonable requires you to go, did you do everything truly that you could and should have done? If you look at, the likes of the larger corporates, often you think, well, you did know that was happening. Any form of factory check would have found that. Any form of, would have found that. Are you being reasonable in what you're doing? And, like I say, the amount of time that we spend on getting partners approved into, we're now going to work together, is long, laborious and costly, but for good reason, because it is reasonable to expect that we would do that. It's also reasonable to expect that we have audits in place. These are things that, sometimes things will go wrong. We're human and things will go wrong. But are you doing everything that is reasonable? Are you asking the right questions? And are you being transparent about anything that you have found? So, I think there's a couple of other companies that I would point to and say, well, they've because they were reasonable in doing everything that they could, when it came that they found a problem, they survived it. Tony's is a great example of, child-free cocoa production. And then there was potentially going to be this big scandal but we found child labour in the supply chain. And they were immediately able to say, yes, but the thing is, we're aware of it. And if you're aware of it, then you can start to tackle the problem. This is what we do, which is very reasonable, of understanding the full level of the process. It's why we can say that we have X number of children that were involved in this production. And we know exactly how to address that. And we can now address that. Mm-hmm. That's where, the difference is to go, okay, do you know where your problems are? Yes or no? If you don't even know where they are, how are you ever going to address them? Mm-hmm. And it's reasonable to expect that of a business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And there's a lot of examples of really well-meaning founders and founder teams that have found themselves scaling, and then selling. Yeah. And the new owners mightn't necessarily be are essentially buying the brands and they're buying the kind of the feel-good attachments and that the consumers may have and might even recognise have been sold. How do you keep yourselves honest? Do you think, okay, if say Amazon came along to say in the morning we're going to buy you, would that be something that's entertained, or is that something that says no, we must be aligned with whoever our next growth partner is?
Yeah, how do you keep yourself honest? Well, two areas really. So the first is you're almost protected by where the brand value is. Mm-hmm. If you're buying Ocean Bottle, if you then took away the impacts and you stopped doing that, you wouldn't have Ocean Bottle anymore. You just have another bottle brand. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to buy that, you're buying it for the impact story. That's
back then against that slightly, because I think that the Ocean Bottle story isn't just about Ocean Bottle. It isn't just about the bottle. It's about everything that you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. There's more to it.
But if you stop doing that, what do you have left? It's a product.
You can still do the singular product that has the impact of taking out your 11 kilograms, and a lot of people will be kind of happy with that.
Yeah.
But I think what you're actually buying into is what comes next from Ocean Bottle, what the next idea is, what the next the next impact point is. I'm not sure that you would lose your consumer base if it was just well we've got this beautiful looking product and we take 11 kilograms worth of plastic.
I see your point, but you would lose your growth. So what's the point of buying and investing in a company that you plan to kill? But in all honesty, would we entertain that deal with Amazon? How do we keep ourselves, on the straight and narrow, as it were? We, this year, have set up our Impact Advisory Board, which fully, external experts in the field that are there to say, this is what good looks like. This is where the most, the cutting edge is going, and where the largest issues are. Are you addressing those? Is this impact strategy? Is this business strategy actually going to get there? This is an independent view. They're there to challenge us. You've got the likes of WWF in there, members of the WWF, to hold us to account. I do think that the value that we've built, as you say, is what people are there and expecting. And if you build the value into what is good and what is impactful, then the business is only going to continue if you continue with that theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the challenge would be, though, you may be in a position where if we sell, the marketing power behind, the globalization power behind might kind of 10x, 20x, 30x the amount of bottles that we shift, and that'll be 20, 30x the amount of plastic that's taken from the ocean. Yeah. I guess the real question is how do you keep yourselves on a greater mission, on a greater goal that isn't beyond trying to be innovative and trying to look at things in different ways, where and scaling. As you are, because it's easy for a small company that is full of innovators to continue to be doing this. But as you scale, either whether it's through an acquisition or not, how do you kind of hold on to what makes Ocean Bottle so innovative and special?
Yeah. Firstly, it's making sure that you have longer term goals that you're working towards and that you can't U-turn on, because it is, to a degree, easy to do that in a small scale team. But even since I've been there, the team has basically doubled, and you try getting something through the team that's not that impactful or not that innovative, you're going to be challenged by 50 people. I'm very proud of the culture that we have built, which is that we bring people in and they are going to challenge every decision, and that makes the decision, you know, we're kind of comfortable and ambitious. It's why, you know, if you look at our impact report, it is ambitious. You've got a whole team of people calling for that same thing. It's got to be embedded into your values, and that's, so yes, as you scale, perhaps you have fewer people that are going to shout about that, but actually it's kind of part of the fabric and the culture of the business now. So as they come in, even if they didn't think they were about to become that advocate, give them 6 months and they are. So I think that that's really important. And again, you couple that with longer term goals. You know, it's, for us, it's 2025, it's 7 billion bottles by that point. There's no point saying, you know, the goal is to do this by the end of the year, because the problem that we're trying to tackle is a many decade problem, right? We're not going to solve plastic going to the ocean tomorrow or the next, you know, in the next 5 years. So what is that longer term goal? And that's what kind of keeps the energy moving in the right direction.
We face a similar problem, and I wonder how you deal with it. That the people that get attracted to working within kind of, you know, renewables, which is my kind of fundamental business, are generally idealists. They're people feel very passionate.
Yes.
It isn't just about E, it's about S and G as well.
Yeah.
And you end up having all sorts of kind of conflict and people trying to, like, and for really good reasons, wanting to be doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, well, no, this is our one goal, this is our big thing. How do you kind of balance the E, the S, the G, and all of a passionate team, all of whom might have slightly different ambitions. All of them want to be going in the right direction, in the same direction, but all of them slightly different ambitions. And especially as you grow and scale, and there's lots of voices there. How do you keep things on this right now?
So I think there's two things to tackle. One is, how do you keep to one goal when E, S, and G are kind of bringing up lots of different goals, and then how do you translate that with your employee base? So from the kind of consistency of message and goal and traction and movement, for us, the North Star is collecting ocean-bound plastic. But as I alluded to, you kind of can't disconnect the E and the S in particular to get there. So if you're going to be setting up a collection centre in a certain area, how do the people in that area actually get access to become part of the solution? They often need support. They often need access to healthcare, access to education, access to, can their kids go to school so that they're not doing the childcare so they can become a part of the workforce? It's not as simple as just create the job and it will be filled. You have to understand what the local community needs to access it. So the E and the S, they have to work hand in hand, and therefore so does our funding. That allows us to invest in kind of social good. It's one of our impact pillars in order to achieve our end goal, which is plastic collection. Once you have that kind of story and that clarity of why I'm investing in these things, you can start to put it into that structure. Does that thing that is very good cause, but does it help us get to our main goal? Doesn't mean that it's not important, but it's not laddering to our main goal. And that's an easier conversation to have, and it's almost a non-biased framework through which to have the conversation. We all have the clarity of this goal that we're brought into. How do you manage that on a team level? And everyone kind of joins with almost their own mission. Is being clear to the team of this is the mission that you're joining, and attracting talent that want to be part of that mission. What is a great privilege, and I'm sure you feel the same, is that we get fantastic talent through the door because people want to be part of this. And because we are for profit, we don't have to say, by the way, you get to work for no money whatsoever. You'll have a competitive salary, you'll have healthcare, and you get to work for something that is important. You win over the big corporates every time. And so you do get talent through the door that, yes, is passionate, but also has all the skill sets and capability that you need to take that forward in a very productive way.
At some point there has to be those kind of the big crunch moments where, like say with Ocean Company, just for example, you have built up a community, and you decide, well, we want to be signing a partnership with, say, Costa, or whatever, and Costa gives you some money to be attracting people into their businesses, whether they're refilling and they might buy a coffee holder in there, that type of thing. It makes sense for everybody. But you then have a decision to make of, well, we're getting some money here. We can either be paying ourselves a bit more, or we can be, taking some more plastic out. And there's going to be some people in there saying, hey, seriously, like, we work really hard, we should be, and we've gone through a great contract, we should have a little bit more money. And other people going, well, no, really, the purpose we're here is to be taking plastic out. It's like, how do you, you're going to be hitting those moments of truth as you grow, and how do you foresee dealing with them?
So we have a kind of a no bullshit protection in place, I guess, which is 15% minimum of our revenues not profit, goes to impact. So ultimately, if we're not reaching that, well, it's going into that pot. That's first and foremost. Impact has to win with all these decisions, right? So it's going into that pot, and that is the main protection, I would say, of that kind of can we, can't we conversation is, are we going to get to 15%? No? Well, it's going in that pot. Going to get to 15%? Okay, well, now we can have a conversation of, well, how do we grow our impact longer term? What is going to get us that growth? It might be investing in talent that's going to get us there. That may well be the best decision for growing impact long term. But we have a constant protection of every year it's going to be 15% minimum.
In the wider scale, looking at it kind of from a macro sense now, there is an increasing amount of attention on oceans and plastics, but it's very recent. And it's been a problem for an awful long time. We're only starting to wake up to it. How do we get the messaging out there that this is actually really, really important?
Yeah, completely. I mean, when you look at the fact that less than 10% of the ocean has been explored, we don't even really know the sides of this problem, right? We're just touching the surface. How do we get the message out? I think that the modern day consumer is actually quite awake to this, and you're pushing on an open door. The kind of the messaging around recycling and reusables, it's there for a lot of people. Again, making it convenient is the challenge, but the real work that we have to do is the movement at the kind of the top of house. It's movement on the policy level, it's movement on the government level, because corporates aren't going to make these changes on their own. And so that's a certainly an area of focus for us, is the likes of the Global Plastics Treaty. We need to see more international cooperation that makes this legally binding. Not well-intentioned messages of support, legally binding, because, like you say, we're at the beginning of the journey when we should be pretty far down this line.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit about kind of global governance? What is the state of plastic governance right now?
Challenging. So I think one of the biggest problems is that so much of the seas are sort of they're not owned by anyone. They're not anyone's particular responsibility, and that then makes it challenging to decide what we're going to do with these areas. Equally, when you start to look at global policies, you have national conflicts. So if you think about whale fishing, for example, whaling. In Europe, that's it's pretty much banned, but it's a huge cultural and economic driver in Japan. So in terms of international policy, you're at odds, right? And so that kind of cooperation is often a challenge. We have seen some glimmers of hope is around marine protected areas. And there are some great examples of where they have, those protected areas, which are not always fully protected, but where they have been fully protected, that you see biodiversity come back to healthy levels. So on a micro level, we're seeing that working. What we now need is for that to start happening on a more global level. So there's definitely an international cooperation part that's needed. The other shift that we need to see to get, the message that we need to get out there is what happens in the ocean is not disconnected to what happens on land. Just because it feels different to us from an Earth's systems perspective, it's one of the same, right? So when we think about all this plastic ending up in the ocean, we think of it as an ocean problem. But what we've just been discussing is it's an on-land waste problem. That's why it's ending up in the ocean, right? So the actions that you take, that the policies that we need to see changing for the ocean's good are often actually about systems that have nothing to do with the ocean, but we're not recognizing the connection there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important stuff. Also really important is, and you mentioned a little earlier, recycling.
Yeah.
It's been a question. It's been something that's been on lots of people's minds for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Like we've had recycling bins, and you know, it's a system that after this amount of time, it should be working.
Yeah.
We should all be very efficient at it. But as we know, like there's very little recycling of very little of the percentage of plastic that we use that actually gets recycled.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah, it's so frustrating. I can't hide my frustration on this. What is needed is something that is simple for the consumer to follow, because I don't know about you, but you almost need a degree of working out what symbol means it can go in what bin and where, and especially in the UK, you know, you recycle in this area. I used to live in Bristol. You recycle in a completely different way. You've got to separate everything. In London, it all goes in one bin. You know, there's no consistency. It's a complete nightmare. Where I would point to, okay, there's hope, is looking at food labelling. So again, it's far from perfect, but we had this movement not so long ago where we said, consumers don't know what's in their food. And you've got this traffic light system that's at least, okay, I can see it's got a lot of red here. It's high fat, it's high sugar, it's high calorie. There's some alerts. There's something that's very simple for me to follow. And suddenly I recognize this product might not be good for me, or this product might be good for me. Now, that's not to say there's, you know, all the kind of ultra processed food movement, and there's a lot of problems with that. But as a step one, it helped the consumer get standardization of how they can assess A versus B. And from a recycling perspective, that's step one. Should be, we have one very clear like labeling system that companies have to adhere to, that is understood by the consumer, because that's the big gap here, is most consumers have no idea what the labeling means, and they don't even know what bins to put it in. I'm in an industry that you know is very, very much focused on this, and I still have to try and, you know, navigate the labeling on packaging. We shouldn't be there in 2024. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, that seems like that's a really kind of nice message to finish on there. So just, we always ask at the end of the interviews for a little piece of advice. Now, we've talked a little bit about how Ocean Bottle is kind of trying to keep itself special.
Yeah.
But the answers have been more around kind of processes and systems, and, you know, setting goals. Okay, more on the kind of the spiritual side, the cultural side. As a purpose-driven organisation, how do you go about fixing the culture for the next generation within your organisation? Great question.
And I would say it's been on processes and you know, operationally, because that's important. If you're not embedding it at that level, it's not going to survive. But what is the culture for the next generation? For us, you know, the number one thing that I would say is we have to tackle this single use, you know, use it and throw it as a culture globally, to be quite honest. And that's such a huge problem to kind of get behind, that actually if you get some intelligent, smart, passionate people attached to it, they will run with it. And from our perspective, it's you know, it's golden. It's the cultural common enemy that we all have of single use is out. It's simple, and it, you know, gets everyone's blood going for sure.
Okay, great. And do you have any examples of how you're promoting circularity within Ocean Bottle or Ocean Company?
As in
within your, like, your team?
Yeah. So, I mean, just last week we went and did a litter pick along the banks of the Thames, which was great. We moved into a new office today. I've just come from our new office, and you'll see that we've moved to having all of our lunch boxes, for example. You can just take them from the office, and they're all kind of non-plastic glass containers, stainless steel containers, because make it convenient for your people to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You know, it all comes back to, is it convenient? Is it there on hand? If you can do it internally, we're a small company, it's not that hard. Just give people what they need to make the right choices.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. That's been great.
Cool, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us on that conversation. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you learned something. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to leave a 5-star review and to subscribe to any of our channels, and we'll be sure to keep you updated on future productions. These are conversations that you just can't afford to miss.